All right, welcome back. So, in order to get started on building out our conference room, the first step is to build out the framework of our UCI so that we have a blueprint that we can put all of our buttons on. So let's take a couple of minutes and do that first. We'll talk a little bit about just some basics about building UCIs. Follow along with me. First things first is, what are we going to eventually build? Our scope of work for our UCI is as follows. We're going to provide the following functionality on our touchscreen. We have 3 primary pages. I'm putting pages in quotes there for a reason. I'll talk about pages in just a second. And we're going to apply a client's CSS style to this. So we're not going to worry too much about choosing our own colors and fonts and sizes and things like that. The client's already got all this predetermined, and we'll apply that globally. So take a look at that. We want on that UCI, first of all, overall audio output level to be always visible. Like any mixing desk, you've got a master fader on the right side. We want a master fader for all the audio in this room. We have 3 pages for controls. The room controls. The room controls is going to control the lighting. We'll have a manual fader that you can change the lights yourself, or 4 preset recalls, so all the way on, all the way off, dark and dim, something like that. We also control the shades. We want to be able to raise the shades, lower the shades, or stop the shades if they're in middle movements. On the display controls tab, we're going to have the ability to turn on and off the displays. We're going to be able to control the video routing so that we can bring any of the HDMI sources to either of the displays. And then we'll have a camera controls tab that will show the preview window for whichever camera is currently active, the ability to choose which camera is active, and we'll add preset save and recall buttons for the camera positions. So these are all really common things that you would want functionality-wise in a conference room. We're going to do them all with block controller. That's the name of the game here. Now, I said I was going to put the word pages in quotes, and I want to talk real briefly about the difference between pages in UCIs and layers. And again, if you took our previous version of this class, this is probably familiar territory for you, but just as a reminder for those who may have skipped it, you can build a navigation system within your UCI in one of 2 ways. You could use pages, or you could use layers. There are benefits to both, but I personally strongly prefer layers, and I'll explain why. Pages are sort of the original way we had of navigating through UCI when Q-SYS was first designed. And it's exactly what it sounds like. You got a page of content, and then you can press a button and go to another page of content. And you hit a button, another page of content. Those pages are completely separate from each other. What I don't like about pages is that they'll often add the navigation tabs on the side of the screen. You can't really edit the visual characteristics of those tabs too much. You can build your own navigation buttons instead, but it just takes a little bit of extra work. But more importantly, what pages don't let you do is you can't see what the user is looking at on that device remotely. The page navigation is specific to the device, not specific to the UCI. What does that mean? Let's say that you are trying to help a client remotely. You're logging into the UCI through Q-SYS Reflect, and you're trying to see what they're looking at. If they're on a touchscreen that is built with pages, you don't know what they're seeing because what they're looking at is specific to their specific device. Now, this could be useful for things like, let's say you're in a museum and you want to have a bunch of informational kiosks, and people could scroll through the pages of those kiosks. In those instances, you clearly don't want one person to swipe the page and that to change the pages on all the other kiosks, right? You want that page determination to be local to the device. But in a system like this, where we're talking about a single touchscreen that's in a room that does a specific thing, it's really nice if whatever is being displayed is known universally rather than locally, so that you can log in remotely and you can see what that user is looking at. And that's what layers let you do. So layers are built a little bit differently. You can see them here. They're kind of like panes of glass, or think about the old animation construction, different animation cells, and you put them on top of each other. You can see them all at once. Same idea. You put your content across different layers. You can see and interact with all of them from the top to the bottom, but we can control these. We can automate them on and off. You can fade them in. You can fade them out. You can move them on from the top of the screen. That's very useful. And you can see exactly what someone is looking at when you are logging in remotely. So all that is very useful. It also lets you, create like secret layers you can have that can come up and reveal certain controls. I think they're much slicker. So we're going to build with layers in this class. And that's by design. You have to do it like I have asked you to for the course of this class. You're obviously welcome to build your UCIs however you want to in the real world. But if you don't follow along with me in this one, then you're going to get left behind. Okay, so let's build our design for this. Let's jump back to our design. I want you to go and drop out of emulation mode if you're still in emulation mode from the previous video. Let's go to our left side pane, down to UCIs, and we're going to add a new UCI by clicking the plus button and creating a UCI. I'm going to call this one my class UCI just to make sure it's different than the emulator UCI. And always a good reminder to take a look at all the properties of your UCI when you build it. Right now, if you look in the style property, nothing is there. That's where we will be applying the CSS style for this UCI a little bit later. Not yet. We don't have any CSS styles installed yet, so there's nothing available. The panel type, let's change that to be one of our newest generations of touchscreens, the TSC 70.G3. You can see that the orientation of this has changed. We can also make this landscape or portrait if you know you're hanging it differently on the wall. If you're not familiar with private and enable button swipe, just a reminder that if you make this private, then it will not show up in any UCI viewers that are connected on the network. It will only be available to the touch panels that have been assigned to display that UCI. I'm going to keep this to no. And then enable button swipe. That's in a circumstance where you want to be able to press your finger onto the touch panel and then slide it across multiple controls, and it will engage every button along the way rather than removing your finger and pressing and pressing and pressing. Some people will want that, especially if you're mimicking the behavior of maybe a bunch of mutes on fader banks that you want to engage, or maybe you're selecting a bunch of zones that you want to send a message to. For us, it's not really important.
Or if you're building like a UCI from the movie Elf, where Buddy does this.
I think we were all thinking that already.
You
didn't need to chime in with that. That was the obvious reference that it was all in our heads.
You dummy.
That Elf reference. So now we've got this configured. What I want to do is take a look over in this panel here. This is the UCI editor pane. We can see all of our layers and pages on the left tab. There's a couple of other tabs you may not have played with yet that we're also not going to play with in this class, but just so you know what they are. The Toolbox tab has a whole bunch of controls in it that you can grab, and you can add them to your UCI. We're not going to do that. Why do those exist? Some people prefer to build the UCI first and then link all the controls to the things in their design. Might be particularly true if you're in a business where there's one person who's in charge of building the UCIs and other people are in charge of the DSP, right? Right now, you're in charge of everything. So rather than add controls first, we are going to build our system as we go, and then we'll take the controls out of our system and put them onto the UCI. So we don't really need this toolbox. There's also a tab called Variables. This allows you to create variables on your UCI that sort of make it easier to adjust various things simultaneously. This is more in the scripting world. We're going to see this in the next version of the class, in the Lua side of things. So we're not really going to touch it here, but we just want to make sure you're aware of that. We are here on our page. Let's rename this page. We're only going to end up with one page, so I don't really need to call it page 1. I'll rename this main page. And if you caret down, you can see we currently have one layer. There's nothing on it, but we have one layer. Let's add the layers that we need. We know that we need 3 different, remember I called them pages, but we're not going to call them pages anymore. We're going to have 3 different tabs on our UCI. The Rooms tab, the Displays tab, and the Cameras tab. So we need to add some layers. We're going to keep one of the layers at the bottom. Remember thinking about those panes of glass. You can see everything all through the panes of glass all at once. The bottom one will always be visible. So things like your background image and logos and that audio control fader we were talking about, that's going to be on the bottom layer so that it's true no matter which of the other tabs we're looking at in higher up. Let's add some layers. You can add layers by clicking the plus button and doing Add Layer, or you can do Alt-L. I'm going to Alt-L myself, a total of 4 layers right here. And let's name these. All right, naming these. First thing that, where we get to a point where I want to instill in you some good housekeeping, some good behavior into your programming mentality. Consistency. Consistency is really important. When you build a UCI, I would highly recommend that you build your UCIs consistently, no matter which design it is. Get onto a similar point on what do you name your layers, what do you name your various components in the design. Pick a convention, some kind of naming convention, and stick to it. And if you've got a lot of people in your company, agree on that. Get everyone on the same page so that when you are editing someone else's design, or when they're editing your design, or they're trying to test it in the field, they are in an environment that's more familiar and comfortable to them as well. When it comes to naming layers, same idea. I could very well call this layer displays. I could name it right. I could name this one cameras. I could name this one rooms. I could name the layer 1 bottom. I don't know what you want to name it. These layer names, to me, aren't very helpful. Yes, they are descriptive, and I like that, but there's a couple of issues with them. First of all, there's going to be times in the design where the layer names will show up alphanumerically, where they will be listed, not in the order you put them here on the UCI editor window, but in alphanumerical order. Well, you'll notice that's not the same order we got here. It wouldn't put, it would end up wanting bottom to go at the top, and then cameras, then displays, then rooms. So you'll notice that you're starting to have to hunt around in your list of things because they're never in the same order in different places that you look at them. So I'm going to add a prefix to these, and the prefix will help me keep them in order wherever I see them. So let me undo those names and restart. I'm going to name the very top one with a prefix of 100, and then underscore, call it room. 100 room. Why 100? Why not 1? Why isn't 1 good enough? Well, I could have done 1 room, but then that doesn't leave me a lot of room for growth later on, because the next one's going to be 200 displays. If it turns out that I needed a sub-layer of room, then putting it in 100 and 200 gives me plenty of room between those to have like a 101, a 102, a 1050, or 1050, a 150 between those two layers, right? To make sure that I've got this room for growth and flexibility. Let's keep going. This is going to be 300 cameras. And Patrick, what's the last one going to be?
Theodore.
Theodore, yes. I'm going to name this 999. 999 base. Why 999? Why did I go all the way to 999? I could have called it 400. I could have called it Theodore. But by going to 999, that means that I've got room for more tabs if I want to add them later on. If they discover that they need a tab for the AC, that can be 400. They want a tab for something else. I'm not stuck with a fixed number where now my base would have to be above these other layers. So got plenty of room. That way 999 will always be at the bottom alphanumerically anytime I see them. That's great. Okay, we are actually going to be adding some more layers in this class later on, so this will be even more useful when you get there. Now, we do need something on our layers. We're going to be adding lots of content throughout the course of the class. Let's add just a title onto them for now, just so that we know that they are the layer that we're talking about. I'm going to just go down and use the header tool, and we'll add a title at the top of each page. So click on the layer you want to add something to first, to make sure that that is the active layer. It glows blue when it's active. Then click on what you're going to add, in this case a header. I'll make a big header up here at the top, and I'll name this room controls. And I'll just resize it so it takes up the entirety of that UCI. I'm not going to spend a lot of time picking a font, picking a size, picking a color, anything like that. Like I said, we are going to apply a CSS to this just a little bit later. The only thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to change the size. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just so I can read it for now while I test it. This is going to be automatically changed later when we apply our CSS, but I just want to make sure that I can actually read it while we're building this out really quickly. So room controls, that is on the room layer. Double check yourself. Make sure you put it on the right layer. I'm going to disable the visibility of my layer by clicking the show hide eyeball icon. Voila, that layer has vanished. That indeed was on the right page. And then I can click on the displays layer and put a header there. Now I could grab the header tool and add it from scratch. I'm going to show you a quick trick. Instead, I'm going to go back to the room layer. I'm going to copy this. You can do either by right-clicking and doing copy and paste, or I'm just going to do Control-C. I'll go down to displays and hit Control-V. You'll notice that when you do paste, it doesn't actually paste the object into the workspace. It kind of sticks it to your cursor. It's not moving anywhere yet. You got to click it, and that's where it'll paste it. While it's in this purgatory mode of not knowing where it's going to be placed, you can hold the Shift key, and it will automatically place itself in the same XY coordinates from where it was originally copied, which means that you know it's going to be the exact same location. You're not going to get that little pixel jump from getting things wrong. So I'm still holding Shift down. Now I'll click. Now I know it's pasted in the same place. Let's rename that Displays Control. We'll do that same trick for the next one. I'm going to copy it, make that layer invisible, go to the cameras layer, paste. This is called paste in place. Shift, click, and this is going to be cameras control. And then just do yourself a favor. I'm going to collapse mine and just make sure you did it right. Turn each layer on and off. Make sure that you have the right label on each page, or else you're going to find it very confusing later on when you're like, I'm on the cameras page. Why does it say displays? You may notice that right now we can turn all the layers on at the same time. Oh, we don't want that. We specifically need to avoid that. We need to add some navigation control for our UCI that will only allow one layer to be active at once. So that's going to be our first block controller exercise. We'll do that in just a bit. Take a quick break, and we'll see you then.